Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. My name's Sam Norris, and I will be your host today. We've still got a few more people joining there. The numbers have gone up quite rapidly just in the last few seconds even, so we'll give everyone a bit more time to join. We've just got a bit of housekeeping here. We've got the questions and answers that you can ask. Martin has already asked a question there. Everyone's mics and cameras are disabled. Yes, that is correct. We cannot hear you and we cannot see you. I don't have my camera on. I've just got the slideshow on at the moment, so you should be able to see the start of the slideshow. And we will be recording this, and it will be available on our forum at a later date. The chat is there as well. There are a few people, a few things there as well. During the whole webinar, if you've got any questions or comments on what is going on, because I will be doing some live demos, feel free to chime in, and I can always add some additional things in if needed. Okay, so welcome to this webinar, which is all about how to get the best out of your Peplink. So Peplink's mission statement is unbreakable connectivity anytime, anywhere. This has become even more important with the events of the past year. So today's webinar is aimed more at general users rather than our partners. So for the partners that have joined us, please don't hesitate to ask if you want me to cover something in more detail. The topics we will be covering today include cellular modems, things such as APN details, resetting a modem, common cellular modem problems, troubleshooting and solutions. We'll also be looking at outbound policies. So outbound policies control which traffic uses which WAN. We'll go through some different situations and examples of how to configure them. We'll then also have a brief look at some of our antennas, including our Puma and our new Stingray antennas for maritime. So I'm now going to switch over to the interface of an HD4 MBX. The model I'm using has category 18 modems. Okay. So this is the main dashboard page. Many of you will be familiar with this. And this is the main page that you will be greeted with when you log into your router. So first of all, I'm going to have a look at the cellular modem here. So I've only got one SIM card active in this device at the moment. I was planning on taking the SIM card of my phone and put in there, but I just remembered I haven't done that. So if we click on the details here beside this one, it opens up a window. So these are all details around this cellular modem. So this is in Cellular 2. So for most users, leaving most of these settings as default will be sufficient. So things here like the networking mode as auto and that kind of stuff, as auto will be sufficient for most people. You can rename your connection, something that will allow you to remember it better. So I'm going to rename this one Meteor, as that's the provider. Could be something with a SIM card, just so you know which SIM card's which. I've got just one SIM card in here at the moment. So I have just selected SIM card A. So it's only trying to use SIM card A. So for the carrier selection, this is something that you might want to use if you're roaming. So if you're not in your home country, you'll be able to select a network that might perform better than the one that the router's automatically selected. So you can manually select here by doing a scan. This does take about 2 minutes or 1 to 2 minutes, so I'm not going to do it right now, but it will disconnect you at the time. It will disconnect that cellular connection and scan for another network, and then you'll be able to select from all the networks that are there. You can also select whether you use LTE only or 3G only. Generally auto is sufficient, but sometimes people only like to use LTE, so you can select that there as well. Band selection, you can also select a band. So if you know that a band is bad in a certain area, you can disable it. For example, at the moment here, you can see that I am connected on band 20. So I could, if I wanted to, disable band 20 now, and then it wouldn't use that. So I could do a speed test now before I disable it, and I would know what my throughput would be on band 20, and then save this without band 20 and I'll reconnect on another band, do another speed test, and you'll know the difference between the speeds on the different bands. That's a very basic way of testing the different bands, but you can play around with it and see what suits you in a different location. So obviously, if you do this kind of configuration, it's only going to be suited to the location you're in. If you move to a different port, the bands are going to be different and that kind of stuff. So generally, you're best off leaving it with all the bands available to the router. So data roaming, you can have it disabled. So like there, you can then enable it for any countries. You can then create an allowed countries list or a denied countries list. So an allowed countries list could be used somewhere like in the European Union, where you might have a data package that allows data to be used throughout Europe. You could enter the MCC or the mobile country codes of all the countries that are covered by your plan in there. Alternatively, if you know you're operating in an area that's got a country that you're not allowed to use because it's going to be a massive data bill, you can enter those MCCs there so you don't get a sudden surprise. The authentication, generally, you're going to leave that as auto. Okay, now the operator settings, sometimes this will be automatic. I've left mine as auto here because it's automatically filled it in. If that doesn't work, you can manually enter it by changing it to custom and putting the APN, the username, and the password there. Generally, the APNs will be available online if you search the carrier and the APNs, but sometimes you will be given custom APN details by your carrier that you have to enter. So you might want to check with your carrier first. The SIM pin, if your SIM has got a pin on it, you'll want to enter that here. You can also disable the pin. Mine is currently disabled already, but if it was enabled, you could click here and click on disable pin, and that just makes it a lot easier to use the pin because it's not going to get confused. So the bandwidth allowance monitor here, this allows you to set limits on a individual WAN. So this makes sure that you don't go over your allocated data allowance. I recommend that you set the data limit just below your allowance by about 1% or so. So for example, if you had a data limit of 100 gigabytes, I would set it at 99 gigabytes. What this means is that the router will stop using that SIM card just before the data limit is reached. The next thing we've got here is the signal threshold settings. So this dictates the minimum signal that the cellular router will use on that modem. You can change it here just by on the signal bars, but you can also actually click on the help button here and click here, and then you can actually manually enter numerical numbers here. These question marks that you'll see all over the device are very helpful. They will quite often unveil hidden menus like this and advanced features. So one thing that I'm going to show you now is how to reset a modem. So this is just to reset the modem, not to reset the whole router. So you might want to do this if the cellular carrier tells you to restart your device, or if you notice that a band or something has stopped working or throughput's got bad. You can come here into your details on a cellular modem, and you scroll down to the cellular settings here, and you click on the question mark, and beside it here, you can click on that you want to reset the cellular module, and you click here. Then when you click on yes, it'll reset that modem. You don't need to save and apply the settings when you do that modem reset. You can just close this window. But if you have changed settings here, like these band settings, etc., you do need to scroll down to the bottom and click on save and apply here. I'm not going to click on save and apply because these settings I don't actually want to save. So for this example today, I'm going to use, I've got the single SIM card in, Wi-Fi WAN, and an Ethernet connection. We can pretend that the Ethernet connection is a VSAT connection. It's not actually, but we can just pretend it is for the outbound policies and that we're going to cover. Something else we didn't cover there in the Cellular that I'll just go back to. Down the very bottom, we've got the health check settings. So generally, I use the smart check option. And if this fails, if it says smart check fails, it generally means that the SIM card is connected to a network but is not getting internet. So this can be due to a few things, but common issues are that the SIM card has not been activated, the data allowance has been exceeded, or the APN details have been incorrectly added. So if you see it saying smart check failed, don't go and disable. If you go and disable it and then it goes green and says connected, generally what you'll find is that, yeah, it's made it look like it's connected now, but actually you'll find that the internet is still not working. So usually if it fails this, it means that the internet is not working. You can also use DNS, ping, or HTTP lookup. So they're available here in the drop-down box. Again, you can check on the little question mark here. That will give you a whole lot more information of each one. So now we're going to go back to the main dashboard. So I'm going to close out of this. So another thing that you might want to do with the cellular modems is have a look at any text messages it's received. So these could be messages from a carrier saying how much data you've got left and things like that. So you can click on advanced here. And then on the left-hand side, you scroll all the way down to SIM Toolkit. And wait for that to load. Cellular 2, because that's the one that's got a SIM card in it. And then you can select SMS, and it will load the SMSs that are being received by that SIM card. So there we go. We've got one that's been received. You can also use the USSD codes if your carrier supports them, so you can submit codes that way. For the USSD codes, you'll want to consult with your local partner or with your carrier about what USSD codes can be used. So do we have any settings about the cellular modem settings? I've seen a few questions here. So the first one I'm going to answer is from David. Will you discuss the SpeedFusion Cloud? It hasn't been included in this webinar, but I will briefly go over that in a second. So the SpeedFusion Cloud is our SpeedFusion bonding through our own servers. So it's very easy to set up. I don't have it set up on this device, and I've already used my free trial on this device, so I can't re-enable it again. But I can show you, I think I've got it hidden at the moment. So let's go to the setup of it. So there we go. So generally, by default, when you log onto your device, it'll be displayed here under the SpeedFusion Cloud as a tab of its own. I won't be able to get an activation key because I've already used it, and I can't access the settings because it's not activated. But it's very simple. You just choose your location, and it'll connect automatically. You don't need to set up any of your own servers or anything like that. Okay, so there's a question from Benjamin. When using the SpeedFusion Engine CAM in a remote location with different cellular carriers in slots A and B, how does one make sure that the router is automatically using the best SIMs from the best cellular carrier in a specific location? That's something that's a little bit hard to do because it's something that you're going to have to do manually, because when a SIM card's connected, it's not using the other one at all. It's not connected to that network or anything. And it's only got, it's focused on that SIM card. So if you want to test that and see if the other one's any better, you've actually got to manually change it over and test that one. So obviously the Speed Fusion cam, the Duo one has dual modems. So you could have someone remotely looking at that while the cameraman's in the field. But generally, if you've got a dual modem router and you've got 2 SIM cards and modems 1 and 2, not slots A and B on the same modem from different carriers, you'd be able to compare those in real time, and that's the best way to compare it, is those two. Antoine, is it possible to automatically forward the received SMSs to an email address? No, it is not, but we do have some things in the APIs of what you can do with SMSs. I think it will be possible to create your own API call that would forward them on, but we don't have that at the moment on the router. From Brandon, why does LTE-A drop off periodically and how do you lock it in? So LTE and LTE-A, the LTE-A part is a feature of the networks, and LTE means it's connected and is on a single cellular frequency. If it displays LTE-A, it means it's using a secondary frequency. My one at the moment isn't using a secondary frequency, so it's not showing LTE-A. And this is a feature of the networks. It's not something that we can control. So it's not possible to lock it in like it is on LTE or 3G. It's not possible to force it to only use LTE-A. It's something that the network allows to happen or not. So that's something that we don't have any control over from the router side. David's asking, I need support for Speed Fusion, the best method for this. If you need support, you can request support via our support portal. That is the best way to reach to get support. And I'd also recommend that you reach out to the partner who provided the equipment to you. Usually the partners have got very good local knowledge of the SIM cards and the local cellular environments and things like that. So they would be your first port of call for information and help. The question from Sean, there's maybe a support question, but using MNVOs, any best practice for carrier selection? I'm seeing the MNVO names show up in the carrier selection option, but then the name of the master carrier showing up in the carrier name. Yes, so this is something that does happen here. So for example, my carrier is showing up here as Meteor. If I go and do a carrier selection, I believe this might show up as 3 Island because Meteor doesn't actually exist anymore. Meteor, but I believe their name is still broadcast on the network, so it's now 3. So I'm just going to do a scan here and I'll show you that. So just in a second that'll come up, and I'll come back to in a second once that scan is completed, Sean. Roman's asking how to set up a bonding stream properly for a video stream. This is very much dependent on your requirements. Is it something that you want a video stream for a very short time and you want to use, you can use as much data you need for that time, or is it a much longer stream that you just want a bit of reliability there? It really depends on that. So you can look at things like in the Speed Fusion settings. Obviously for broadcasting, you definitely want to be using Speed Fusion. So then having a look into the Speed Fusion settings at things such as the WAN smoothing, the level of that, and forward area connection, things like that you want to have a look at. Okay, so just back to the question earlier there, you can see here now that my carrier selection is done. So I think this is kind of what you're referring to with the MVNOs. I've got 4 carriers showing up. I've got, well, 3 actually. There's Vodafone Ireland, 3 with 3G only, and then air and 3 with LTE. So I don't actually see the Meteor broadcasting as a network as such, but it's 3 that is, sorry, air is the network that I am using. So air is the one that I'm actually subscribed with for the SIM card, and that would be the one that I'm actually connecting to. So this would be kind of a similar example to that, where I would select air, click OK on that, but then up here it's showing in, it's actually showing an MVNO name. So it's I think it's in the reverse to what you explained, but it's the same kind of situation there, where it's kind of a naming thing that is happening on the networks. Okay, so the next thing, there's a question there from David. I've got 4 devices in priority 1. So it depends on what device you've got. If you've got a device such as our BR1, some of the other devices can only do a single WAN at a time, even though they've got multiple WANs, so you can fail over between them. This is an HD4 MBX, so I can lose all of these connections in priority 1 at the same time if I wanted to. I could have some in priority 2. So it's Cellular 2 and 3 as such, and it's as simple as dragging and dropping in there. So it really depends on the model you've got. If you want to, Dave, if you want to let me know what model router you've got there, I can answer that question better. Samuel Santiago is asking, I want to use my Peplink router as a failover WAN. Will that be covered in this webinar? Yes, it will be. I'm going to do the next section I'm going to do is going to be on outbound policy. So your question will be answered in that, on how to create a rule to do that. Okay, so I'm just looking at that and a few more questions here. I just want to get these questions of cellular out of the way before we move on to the next section now. So is it possible to, Robert asked, is it possible to set a daily limit instead of a monthly limit? I don't believe we've got that at the moment. So yeah, it's a case of, let's get back to it. Yeah, so it's a daily limit and we've got a start day. So it can't be a daily limit. For that feature, I would recommend, I think if you have a look on the forum, there might be a few other requests for that. I can follow up on that for you, Martin. But that's something that could be there, because I do know there are packages out there that do allow you, say, 5 or 10 gigabytes a day. How much data does it use? Is that regarding the cellular router or smart check? I'm assuming you mean smart check. So smart check doesn't use very much data, because what it actually does is it doesn't create health checks unnecessarily. It actually monitors the traffic that's going out and coming back to make sure that the traffic is successfully being delivered. If there is no traffic going from the router, then it will generate small amounts of data. But that's kind of why it's called smart check, is because it's really minimizing the data load that it's using. If you're using ping or DNS, it's going to be constantly using small amounts of data to do a health check there. Okay, yeah, question here from David. So yeah, you're using the Soho router. So yeah, the Soho, I'll have to double confirm that, but I believe that's a single WAN router. So you can only use the single WAN at a time. You can fail over, I believe you can fail over the cellular. But yeah, if you want, you can send us a message. There'll be an email address at the end of this, and we can look into that exactly for you. Question here from Bruce. Priorities, what moves you from the 2 to the 1? So you literally click on it here and drag and drop it. So I'm going to do cellular 2, and you can drag it and drop it into the next WAN down, or the next priority down. It's as simple as drag and dropping. That's it. A question from Sean. When using Wi-Fi as WAN source, is there any priority which the Wi-Fi antenna is used? For example, if we have one on board on the antenna on the mast. So I'm assuming you mean the routers that have got two antenna connections for the Wi-Fi. You should be connecting both those antennas to exterior Wi-Fi antennas. It's not a case of one's used for LAN, one's WAN. They're both used for both LAN and WAN. If you are using it for exterior Wi-Fi WAN, you might then also want to put in Wi-Fi access point on the interior of the vessel as well. Brandon asks, what is the quantitative value in IC2 when you're looking at bandwidth reporting? Is that bandwidth being used, and is there a way to run a speed test remotely to select an alternative band remotely? There's a few ways you can manually run a test. One is using the speed fusion tunnel that's already up. You can run a test. Another way is using our WAN analyzer test, which you would need another Peplink device somewhere on the internet. So that's under system. WAN analysis here. So you'd set a device as a server. That could be a Fusion Hub in the cloud, and then on this remote device you'd set as a client, and you put in the IP address of it, and you can run a test WAN to WAN as such. The easiest way though would be with a speed fusion tunnel. That's the easiest way to do it, because tunnels are already there and you can run a test then. From Bruce, okay, the priorities wasn't clear. If you have a SIM on one and another on two, what are the conditions that priority 2 SIM will be used? So let's say, for example, I'm going to remove WAN 1. I'm going to remove everything down to priority 4 except for the cellular. So, for example, if you've got a SIM card that you primarily want to use, like the one I've got here in priority 1, and then you got SIM cards in priority 2. The SIM cards in priority 2 would be used when SIM card 1 fails. That's going to start using them. Another way you can do this is via the outbound policies, which we're going to cover soon. If you've got advanced outbound policies, you're going to want to just leave everything here in priority 1. So I'll explain that in a second anyway. So let's shift these up. I think I might have kicked myself out because I'm using network control and I just changed the WANs. So yeah, so I think we're going to move now on to the next section, which is about the outbound policies. So if you're using advanced outbound policies, I recommend you have all your WANs in priority 1. So let's go here. Okay, so on the outbound policies now, I'm going to do a bit of a live demo. But first of all, I'm going to go through some of the policies here. So the most commonly used policies in maritime are weighted balance, priority, and enforced. Other ones are used, but these are the 3 in my experience that are most commonly used in maritime. So I'm going to cover these three policies and explain kind of what they do. So weighted balance allows you to assign traffic to different links and ratios based on sessions. This works great for load balancing and sharing traffic between multiple links. For cellular, we recommend that you set each WAN at the same ratio because the vessels are moving and cellular connection speeds are always changing. If you have a connection with fixed speeds of say 10 megabytes per second download and a 2 megabytes per second upload, alongside another connection that has a connection speed of 20 megabytes download and 4 megabytes upload, so twice the speed on one connection as on the other one, what would you use as your weighted balance ratio? So you can say there in the chat. So we've got a 2 connections. WAN 1 has got 10 meg down, 2 meg up. WAN 2's got 20 meg down and 4 megabytes upload. What would you set your ratio at? Okay, so I would set the ratio for that at 1 to 2. Obviously, you can also set it 2 to 4, 3 to 6, 4 to 8, all that. They're all the kind of same. So the weighted balance does not apply to SpeedFusion profiles, as it cannot detect the traffic in a tunnel. So this is just for traffic that's going out over this connection. The next policy we're going to look at is priority. Simply put, this routes all the specified traffic across the preferred connection as long as that connection is healthy. When a connection is not healthy or not available, traffic is then routed over the next available connection. So this rule can be used to direct traffic at a SpeedFusion tunnel. The third one we're going to look at is enforced. Enforced means that specific traffic will only be able to route over a single defined connection. Enforced can also be used with the SpeedFusion tunnel. So the enforced rule will also even work even if that WAN is down. So if you create an enforced rule that enforces it to say a cellular link and that cellular link is not working, that traffic just will not go out to the internet because it's got nowhere to go. So next, I'm going to do some live outbound policies here with you, just so you can kind of get an idea of the examples of what we're doing and how we can do it. Let me just refresh the main dashboard here. Okay, so I'm just going to disable the ones I'm not using. So let's say, for example, in this example, we've got 3 WANs, a VSAT, a cellular, and port Wi-Fi. So generally on a yacht, what you're going to want to do is use the port Wi-Fi as priority 1. And if that's available, you don't want to use anything else. You just want to use 3-port Wi-Fi. Then if that's not there, so the boat's out of port or the port Wi-Fi is down, you then want to use the cellular. And then as a last resort, you can use the satellite. That's there for if you're out of range of cellular on a remote area as such. So to create an outbound policy, you go to advanced and click on outbound policy. So first of all, though, I'm actually going to show you the network on this device because that helps you understand what we're directing where. So currently I've got 3 networks here, the base network and then 2 VLANs. We can create a third one as well. So I'm just going to create this here while everyone's watching so you can see what's happening. So we give it an IP address. I'm going to give it the IP address 1 further up than that. And we can call this business. And give it a VLAN ID. I'm going to give it 53 just to match this bit here. Just to match that one. The DHCP server range. Again, that's just within the range of the subnet. And then we can save and apply that. So save and then apply the changes up here. So now we've got an additional VLAN there. So these VLANs can be used to separate your traffic into different easily to manage networks. So now we go to the advanced settings and we look at the outbound policy. As you can see here, there's currently a default rule in here, which is HTTPS persistence. That's a rule that's just always put on the routers there as default. So next, we can create a rule. So click on traffic to cellular. Oh. Okay, so source any. So the source is where the traffic is coming from. Again, click on question marks. It'll give you a lot of information there of what it actually is. So on the source, we can select any IP address, IP network, MAC address, or client associated SSID. We want to capture traffic from anywhere on this device. That'll capture it from any of those VLANs we just looked at. If you select IP network, you can put in the IP network of a network, say the business network we just created, 53.0. And that would then this rule would only apply to the traffic originating from that business network. But we're going to do any for this one. Destination, again, we want that any because we don't care where that traffic's going. We just want to have control over it. Protocol, you can define the protocols here as well. So you can select from a predefined protocol, or you can create your own one. So you could know the TCP port that you want. It could be any port, single port, or port range. You can also select things such as UDP, IP, and even DSCP. So those are a bit more advanced features there, but definitely they've got uses in certain applications for maritime if needed. The next thing we're going to look at here is the algorithms. So we've already covered 3 of the algorithms, and we can now create a rule using the load balancing, which was already selected, so weighted balance. So we want this all traffic to balance on the cellular. So I'm going to set everything apart from the cellular WANs to a weight of 0. So we bring these all down. And then the last rule here is when no connections are available, what do you want to do? You can either drop the traffic, and that means that the traffic's not going to go to the internet, or you can allow it to fall through to the next rule. What that means is that you can load balance on 4 cellular connections here, but if they all fail, you can then have another rule here below that rule, and it could be called fail over to VSAT. And that again could be source NE, and then the final rule could be enforced and VSAT. And because it's the last rule at the very bottom, or it's not at the moment, you can drag and drop it. Because it's the last rule at the bottom, and we can get rid of this one, it's the last rule to be matched. So it can be an enforced one because that's the last VSAT you want it to use. I'm going to create another rule here now that's going to allow you to automatically fail over to, or change back over to the port Wi-Fi when you enter back into the port. So rules are matched from top down, by the way. So the first rule is matched. If your traffic matches the rule, it stops searching for another rule, and it follows that rule. So I'm going to call this one use port Wi-Fi. So again, source NE because it's all traffic, destination NE, and I'm going to set this rule as priority. But in the priority, I only want to have the port Wi-Fi, which is the Wi-Fi WAN. So I'm going to drag everything else to lowest priority. So even though it's priority, you can have just one WAN there. Because if you used enforced, you wouldn't be able to use this failover at the bottom here, fall through the next rule. You wouldn't be able to select that if it was enforced. So that's why I'm using priority and then removing all the other connections. So priority is just a single one, which is the port Wi-Fi. So we're going to save that. So with these 3 rules that we've created here, I haven't applied them yet, but with these 3 rules, what it means is that the traffic on the device is going to match with this first rule if port Wi-Fi is available, and you're going to use that port Wi-Fi. If the port Wi-Fi is not available, it's going to fall through to the next rule. And the next rule is load balancing, and that's going to load balance on all 4 cellular connections. So what's going to happen here is, even for example, right now, because I've only got 1 cellular connection enabled, it's going to put all the traffic over that 1 cellular connection. If that last remaining cellular connection fails, it's going to fall through the next rule again. The next rule is enforced to VSAT. So these rules will then work backwards as well when you return to cellular from VSAT back to cellular and then back to port Wi-Fi. So what this means is you can change over between them all. So is everyone following me here on this? Give me a thumbs up if you understand these three rules and kind of how they interact with each other. Awesome. So does anyone have any questions about this kind of config? Because this way, what I've done here with this config is just for all the traffic on the device. I'm not concerned about an individual device and what it's doing. This is just all the traffic is following the same profile. What I'm going to look at next is I'm actually going to go in now and create rules that just apply to individual devices. First of all, I'm just going to look at some of your comments and questions and answers here. So I've got a question. So these outbound policies, guys, don't apply to SpeedFusion. This is just traffic that's breaking straight out to the internet from the device if you're not using SpeedFusion. So the questions relating to like hot failover and things like that, they don't actually apply necessarily to this. This failover, what we call a hard failover, where it actually drops the connection and reconnects. If you want to avoid that, you'll need to use SpeedFusion, which will give you the hot failover. I can show you the SpeedFusion configuration. I don't have a tunnel set up on this device, but I can show it to you, how you do a similar kind of config there. Yeah, so there's a question from Samuel Santiago. In case of a VPN in place, do you leave the weight at 10? This weight that is defined here doesn't have any bearing on the VPN, on the SpeedFusion throughput. These outbound policies are just for things that break out. Okay, so Jamison is asking, how do outbound policies interact with the WAN priorities set in the main page? Okay, so this is a very good question, because at the moment, I'm just going to apply this. At the moment, I've got a weighted balancer of 10, 10, 10, 10. So on the 4 cellular connections. If I go back to the dashboard, I've got all connections in priority 1, except for the setup. Let me put the other cellular ones, and then we'll pretend they're active as well. Now, what you can actually do here is, if, for example, you had 2 cellular connections that were unlimited. Say Cellular 1 and Cellular 2 are unlimited data. You can use as much data as you want. But Cellular 3 and 4 were a bit more metered, say 10 gigabytes a month, something like that. What you can actually do is put them now in priority 2. And what that'll mean is, even though the weighting is at 10, 10, 10, it's going to use the Cellular 1 and 2 first, and then it's going to fail over to that. For this particular example, you then also want to bring the VSAT down to priority 3. But you can leave the Wi-Fi WAN and the cellulars you want in priority 2, because the outbound policies are actually determining that you use the Wi-Fi WAN first and then the cellular. Even though that both of these are in priority 1, the outbound policies are actually determining which one is used then. Okay, there's a question here from Mike. What outbound policy can help if you have a dual cellular router and want to determine the best network based on bandwidth available? So for that, you will want to look at using the outbound policy. I'd use the weighted balance. Even if you had the weighted balance and you have one connection that's faster than the other, it will actually show and will go faster. If you do a speed test now and one connection was, say, at 5 meg and the other was at 50, your speed test might only go over one of the connections, but depending on the speed test, because sometimes they do use multiple connections, a little bit hard to tell sometimes. But yeah, it's one of those things that sometimes best just let the router do its own thing on that. You can control these with the outbound policies and all that, but if you want a simple setup, you can let it do its own thing as well. But if you want to determine it, you can go and do the tests, and you can do outbound policies and test each WAN individually. Question here from Doug. Is it not the same as doing the priorities in the dashboard? It is similar, but there are some other things that you can change in that. If with doing it with the outbound policies, you can also do a few other additional things, like you can create a rule that allows, say, for the crew to always use the VSAT, for example. So if we look at the networks here, we can see that the crew VLAN is this one here. So we can now go to advanced and outbound policy, and we can create a rule, and we can call that crew to VSAT, and we set the source as the IP network of the crew. The destination is any, because you don't care where it's going, and then you can set this to enforced, and you can say, okay, VSAT's already selected there. Save and apply that, and it's in priority 1 there. Once you apply that, that means that any traffic from the crew is going to go to the VSAT connection, regardless of if the connection's up or down, or the priorities on the WAN on the dashboard as well. You can also do that rule for an individual device. So you could go captain's iPhone, and you could put the source of the IP address or the MAC address. MAC address is more reliable because the MAC address remains the same on all networks. So I'm just going to put a random MAC address in there. And I've hit play. So excuse me 1 second if you hear music, because my iTunes is loading, because I've hit the play button instead of I was hitting the ones. 1 moment here. Yeah, so the destination there. Okay, there's music. Let's quit that. Sorry if you just heard the music there. Let's go with enforce. So you want to force the captain's iPhone to only use the VSAT, or you might only want to use, say, Cellular 1 or something like that. Maybe the captain's iPhone is not the best. You might say it's a device that's used a lot of data recently. So you could say heavy user. So because it's a heavy data user, you can say enforce it to only use, say, the port Wi-Fi or just the VSAT if the VSAT was unlimited data. So once you save that, destination could be any as well. Or here in the destination, if they're only using a lot of data to a particular domain, say Apple updates or something, you could enter the Apple domain there. I don't believe this is the correct one for all of Apple, but you could enter the domain or the IP address or the IP subnet there. And that'll mean that just their updates, and that'll go to the connection. And if, for this example, if you use port Wi-Fi, that means it's going to be on an unlimited connection that doesn't cost you additional to use. So their update's going to happen while you're in port, but not while you're at sea using cellular or slow VSAT. So again, because that's for an individual device, you're going to want it at the top of the list because it matches it first just for that device. Okay, I'm going to work through some of the questions and answers. Kind of already started on them anyway. Sean is asking, what does the default HTTPS persistence rule actually do? Okay, what the default HTTPS persistence rule does is it means that a HTTPS session that is enabled, that starts and established, it remains on a particular WAN. The reason for this is HTTPS doesn't like to be changed between different public IP addresses, which is what happens when you change these WANs. So things like internet banking, they might start giving you errors, and you might even get blocked out of them if you use different IP addresses, because they think it looks fraudulent that you're accessing their service from different IP addresses for the same session as such. So what the HTTPS persistence rule means is that that session will be persistently using the same connection for that particular time. I hope that explains that. Okay, so David Rothwood asked, can this approach be used to only have a particular VLAN failover to cellular, for example, while everything else does not failover? Yes, you can do that. So this, you've just got to think about how you structure these rules and how they failover between them. There's many different ways you can structure it, and you've just got to think about the different groups, the different priorities, and how you want them to behave. So I think if you explain the situation to me exactly for that, I might understand it better. But you can have like use an enforce rule or something so that other things don't fail over. Mike Anderson asks, can you define outbound policy? Sorry, overflow policy. So if we go add rule now and we select overflow, overflow can be used here as well. So you can use overflow there. So the overflow one is explained here. So the overflow policy is explained just here. I haven't really used this on cellular connections. It's better for fixed line connections where you know the values of them. But if you've got cellular connections that you kind of know what speeds they're going to be, you can actually set the speeds here on the cellular now. This is from the latest firmware. Actually, I believe it might be on the beta firmware that just came out the other day. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it might be hidden. Oh no, here we go. So yeah, it's hidden here on the, so this I believe it was introduced on this firmware, which is the firmware I'm using today is 8.1.1. So beside the cellular WAN connections here, you can click on to configure bandwidth settings, click here. So you can actually define a speed here. So if you know that a cellular connection never gets more than say 25 megabytes, you can add that there. So that's the upload. So let's go 5 megabytes upload and 25 download. You can actually define those there. I would only use these if you are operating in a particular area where you know that those are the kind of maximum speeds you get, and if the speeds were different on the different cellular WANs you've got. So yeah, you can do that there, and you then use overflow with this rule. Edam, is it possible to set a daily limit instead of a monthly limit? Currently, it's not possible. That's something that has been asked for before. So I think head over to the forum and give a quick search, and I'm sure you'll find some details about that. And if you do find something in the forum that you really like the sound of a feature and you don't find it on our firmwares, you can give it a heart on the forum or even a comment, and that's kind of what gets our engineers' attention to really bring these features into the firmware. So Jorg asks, how is it best to deal with static IP addresses on the WANs? So I'm assuming you mean on like the VSAT here. I'm going to click on details here. Currently, this is set up as DHCP because there's DHCP there. It's just on my LAN at home. You can change that to static, PPOP, L2TP, or GRE. Again, there's more info here and also more advanced settings here. You can select routing mode in that. So I'm assuming this is what you're meaning, but dealing with static IP addresses on the WANs, that's where you deal with it here, is by doing static IP address. So generally the VSAT connection, you'd be entering that there, and you'd be entering something like a /31 or /30 subnet there, and the public IP address there. Okay, Bradley asks, when using a wave Wi-Fi or similar on the WAN as a priority, and the antenna loses connection to the shore Wi-Fi, but the WAN connection, the antenna is still connected, how do I get to fail over the priority connection to that is connected? Okay, this is a great question. And I will explain this in more basic ways. So if you have a device on the WAN here, say priority WAN here, which is the VSAT, let's actually go to WAN 2. So I'm going to enable WAN 2 here, and we're going to call this Wi-Fi bridge. So WAN 2 wireless bridge, sorry. So for example, say there's a router on the WAN, which is a wireless bridge to a service. It'll probably have a static IP address. So instead of using DHCP, you put a static, and you can put the IP address. and it could be something like 192.168.100.10. And the default gateway would be the IP address of the radio, which I'm assuming would be the 1. So you set it as static IP address, so it's always there, even if there's no internet. You can select your upload, download bandwidth, etc. So the interface to manage that radio, I assume, is what you want to do. You want to be able to access that regardless if there's internet or not. So what you want to do is copy that default gateway. And what we can then do is we save and apply those settings. Okay, we need DNS servers. So now what we want to do is create an outbound policy. So we'll go to advanced outbound policy, and we're going to add a rule now, and we'll call it wireless bridge access. So the source can be any, and the destination we can set as either the IP address of that radio, which is that, or you could set as the whole domain of that radio as well under IP network. And then what you want to do is you want to select the algorithm as enforced, and you select the WAN that that wireless bridge is on. So what this means is that any traffic, if you type into your browser 192.168.100.1 to access that wireless bridge, it's going to be enforced over WAN 2. And that's even if that WAN is down, not connected to internet or anything. So you save that, and you want that as priority 1 at the top of this list as such. And yeah, that will mean anytime you then go to your browser and you type in the management IP address of that device, it'll be enforced over WAN 2. Even if there's no internet there, you'll still be able to access it over that WAN. I'm assuming that was the question. If it's not quite, let me know. But if you do want that WAN to fail when the connection's not there, what you can actually do is you can on the health checks of it. So as we can see at the moment, there's no cable plugged into it, so it's not there. But if you could set up a health check down here, and you could have the health check as a ping, and that could be pinging the DNS servers or something else. It could be a DNS lookup. And what will happen then is if that wireless bridge is no longer connected to the internet, it'll come up with failed DNS check or failed health check. Even when it says failed health check and it's not been used to route internet traffic over, that rule will still enforce data to it for the accessing the GUI. So I hope that answered your question there. Andy is asking, can you force a connection by type of traffic? For instance, force Netflix or iTunes to use a WAN. So we'll go to the outbound policies now. We don't have a lot of protocols there as such. And the reason why that it's quite hard to do this by outbound policy is because the Netflix ones, we have to sample them, or we don't have to, but the router has to sample it when it creates a connection, and then so it creates the first connection, then we can see that it's Netflix. Well, again, not us, but the router can see that it's Netflix. But that traffic's already established now on a WAN, depending on your outbound policies. Whereas if you've already defined an outbound policy via a protocol of, say, a port or a TCP, you can actually catch that. The outbound policies catch that before it establishes that connection and sends it to a particular connection. So that's why here you can't actually define Netflix or something like that. I will try and explain that in a better way. I'm not quite explaining it very good, but I think I do know Travis has a very good way of explaining it, so I might get him to explain that in a short video for everyone, because it's a very logical way and explains why it's not so easy to direct Netflix over a particular WAN. Okay, I'm going to move through a few more of the questions here now. Okay, so is a question here from David. With a cellular as a limited resource, I only want to support failover traffic that is valued and segmented to a single VLAN. Yep, so what you can do then is you can create a rule. Let's have a look at the rules I've got here now. I'm going to get rid of the access to the wireless. No, I'll leave it there actually. But the heavy user I'll get rid of. No, I'll just leave all the rules here so everyone can see what has been done. So for example, say you wanted the cellular to only be used for a particular VLAN. You could, this one here that we've got all traffic to cellular, we could change that to say guest to traffic to cellular. And then the source would be the IP network of the guest. And that I believe was 190.168.51.0, I believe. Then it'll mean that only the guest traffic, missed a dot there. That will mean that only the guest traffic is going over the cellular network, and any other traffic, so all the other traffic will be primarily using the port Wi-Fi. If say the crew network or if whatever isn't, well, the crew, ignore that one if that wasn't enabled. The crew traffic, so let's disable it. And you can disable these rules just here by clicking that, and then that rule won't be in action. So let's say for now the crew network would primarily use the port Wi-Fi. If the port Wi-Fi failed because the vessel leaves the port, it's going to skip this rule because it's not in that VLAN, and then it's going to go to the VSAT. So I'm assuming that's what you meant there, David. Okay, next question. How to, so from Andreas, how to block iOS and Android OS updates. So this one is a bit harder to do. That's something you're going to have to look at IP addresses and things like that. And it's not something that you can just do as a whole thing. If we go here, and let me just move that out of the way. If we go here now to the QoS, you can actually see the applications. And you could actually put the applications of I believe Amazon here. So you've got Amazon, Apple, iTunes, things like that. You can actually put them here. You've also got Netflix here, but with these ones, you can only set the priority as high, normal, or low. There's no way to drop that traffic or anything like that. This is just QoS, not actual defining what WAN the traffic is using. Question from Abby, is this being recorded and will it be made available later? Yes, we are recording it and it will be available later. It will be on our forum. Yeah, pop over to our forum there in a few days and it will definitely be available there. Sean has just posted a link in the chat there from support, Apple support, which has some details there, and it is very in depth about the ports and the protocols used for different things on Apple devices. So if you ever look through that, you'd be able to use the ports and things like that to really look into what is going on and direct them to different WANs on your device. Thanks for that, Sean. Very helpful. Okay, so let's have a look at some more questions. Okay, I'm just going to have a look through the chat here and see if there was any questions here as well. If you got any other questions, now will be the time to ask. I'm going to also quickly jump over to the SpeedFusion settings and show you them now. Okay. Okay, this link I'm going to share now is, I'm going to send it to, I'm not sure if I can, let me see. I want to send it to everyone. Hang on, let me try here. panel sound changes. Here we go. Okay, this is a link from Sean. Okay, let me quickly jump over the SpeedFusion settings and then we'll have a quick look at the antennas as well. So if we go to SpeedFusion here, there are no tunnels defined on this device, but I can just show you the settings here. So these settings here, you can set the priority here in a SpeedFusion tunnel. So this is completely independent of the outbound policies that we were looking at before. But it is dependent upon and interacts with the priority you set on the main dashboard. So you can set different priorities here. You've also got a whole lot of settings here. So for the earlier question, there was about the WANs for the video stream for broadcasting. You've got WAN smoothing and forward error correction here. So these are some things that you can use to really help you get the best out of your connection. You've also got a whole lot of hidden settings here again for different things like asymmetric, connection mapping, cutoff latency, and a whole lot of stuff. Generally, for most people, just by the default, the SpeedFusion is going to work quite nicely for you, but you can get in there and really play around with some of the settings to make a much better connection for yourself. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have a look at here will be the antennas. So this will be the last section of the webinar. So I just received some of these antennas the other day. Hang on, where have my notes gone? My notes. I need the presenter view with the notes, don't I? Okay, this is not, I love it when you go and try and switch between the screens and it puts the things exactly when you don't want them, doesn't it? Okay, there we go. No, we're not. Okay, let's pause this sharing and I'll get this sorted out. Give me 2 seconds and let me get this all sorted out. Because I'm not sure where the, where has the slideshow gone on me now? Sorry guys, just stand by for a second here. I'm just getting the slideshow back up. I've got the notes back up, but the slideshow is gone. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So it's now on full screen, that's why. Okay, so now, can everyone see my screen there with the Puma antennas up there on the Puma 401 and the 421? Okay, very good. Got someone raise their hand. Perfect. So we're back on now. This is good. So these are the Puma antennas. So a lot of you will be familiar with our Puma 401 there, which is on the left. I just got to ship some sample of the 421 the other day. So these are quite a bit larger than the 401s, but they do a lot more. They're 4 cellular, 2 Wi-Fi, and 1 GPS. So these will be coming out soon. Yeah, as you can see, it is much larger, but it does have the ability to connect to a lot more. So this antenna has been designed for 5G. 5G is something that we have got in mind. We've got the routers that are 5G compatible, and our antennas, we are building them for 5G. Have a look at the gain of these antennas. It's got a very nice gain across all the frequencies. So even in the lower frequency, there's still 2.7 dBi of gain, which is very good for quite a compact antenna of this size. This data sheet will be available on the forum when we upload the video of this webinar as well. So check it out there. So this product will be great for products such as our transit range, the Balance 310X and the MBX. It will allow you to get the best data cellular router and Wi-Fi WAN features with a much smaller antenna footprint. So even though the antenna is bigger, it'll mean that you need to use less antennas. Another antenna that we'll be bringing to the market very soon is the Stingray. There are two models in this range at the moment. We've got the 201, which has 2 cellulars and 1 GPS, and the 401, which has 4 cellulars and 1 GPS. Just a quick note on our numbers on our antennas. The first number, so for example, here in this one, I'm going to circle this for you. So the 2 refers to the cellular, the 0 refers to Wi-Fi, and the 1 here refers to the GPS. So I'm just going to clear all the drawings there. Yeah, so that's the naming, and that's the same on the Puma antennas and all that as well. So these are the Stingray antennas. They are, both antennas actually have the same antenna alignments in it, but the 201 has 2 and the 4 has 4 and is a bit higher. Again, these are built for 5G, and these will change the game for maritime installs, because it'll mean a lot less antennas can be used to get a really nice high gain antenna installed and a compact footprint. So the 401 4x4 MIMO antenna, there isn't anything like this for the maritime yet. So this is something that's new to the market. Okay, so I'm just going to have a quick kind of evaluation of what a HD4 Cat18 NBX install might be like on a vessel. So let's take it, for example, on this one, you've actually got 16 antenna connections for cellular. With the Stingray 401, you'd require 4 of those antennas. And obviously you'd still need 16 coax cables, but there's 4 on each one of these, so you'd need 4 of them. If you had a 2x2 antenna, which has 2 antennas in it, you'd need 8 of them, which is really a lot of antennas. You could also use 4 of our Puma 401s, or 2 of them and 2 of the 421s to get the Wi-Fi in there as well for the Wi-Fi WAN on the MBX. So it's really just about reducing your footprint of the antennas on your mast, but also having a really high quality signal. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about what we've just covered? I do actually have one more comment here about our Stingray antennas. These antennas are actually, because they cover all these frequencies, you'll actually notice that the frequencies that are covered, it also covers the Wi-Fi, not mentioned here, but in the data sheet it is mentioned. It does have a very good gain for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So these antennas can be used as Wi-Fi antennas. You will just need a RP to SMA, RP-SMA to SMA converter, because these are supplied with an SMA connection. So that's something really cool, that you can have a nice high gain Wi-Fi antenna from these as well. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming in here. So question from JJ. You got 2 connections for antennas on cellular modems built in. How do we use them? How do we connect both? And what are your recommendations? So my recommendations are on the modems. You want to connect up all of the antennas. So on our category 12 and below models, there are 2 antenna connections per modem. There's a main and an auxiliary. If possible, connect both. If you only connect it to the main, you might as well not have a category 12 or category 6 modem. You might as well have just a category 3 modem. You're not going to get very good results out of it. Then once you jump up to our category 18 modems and 5G modems, there's 4 antenna connections per modem. These are main and auxiliary, A and B. So it does get a bit confusing, but again, to get the best out of that modem, you really need to have it connected to all 4. So it's an antenna for each one. You don't want to be using things like antenna combiners and things like that. If you have a look on our forum, I have done some really in-depth, a really in-depth 4-part webinar about installing the equipment that talks about how to install it, antennas, placement, what to do, what not to do. And that covers a lot of stuff like that. So yeah, for the recommendations, I'd recommend as high up as possible, clear view of the horizon, things like that. So yeah. Okay, we have got a few more questions here. So Idan asks, can we enforce an application? Can we enforce an application to use a specific WAN? No, you can't, because that's what I was covering before about the when an application makes its initial connection, it's only after that it connects over an IP address and over a connection do we actually see, does the router actually see that it's a specific application like Netflix or something like that? Because services like Netflix and Apple, they use a multitude of different IP addresses. So it's very hard to create rules just on the IP addresses. Too much maintenance to keep a list of those active. So Andrea asks, when having slower connections, is it better to bond SIMs or just have data between them? It really depends on your situation. And do you want to have a reliable connection by using SpeedFusion bonding? So SpeedFusion bonding really can give you a really reliable connection and can increase the speed. Or do you just want to load balance between them? It really depends, and I'd recommend you try them all. You can try SpeedFusion Cloud for free with the free demo, and yeah, that's something you can try there. Bradley, I'm just seeing your question there now. What about Wi-Fi on the Stingray? I covered that there. I must have covered that right about the same time you were asking it. But yeah, the Stingrays do cover the Wi-Fi frequencies as well, and are very nice for that. Doug Miller, for the Transit Duo, would you recommend the 401 or the 201? I would recommend either or. It depends on what the client wants. The 401 is going to give you a single antenna for both the for the cellular and for the GPS. But 201s is going to give you a symmetrical install, and that's so you can do one on each side of the mast kind of thing. So I would possibly be looking at 2 of the 201s. But if symmetricality isn't an issue, I would go with the 401. And then you could add a 201 for the Wi-Fi as well on the transit for the Wi-Fi WAN. So yeah, it really depends. The actual antennas on the inside are exactly the same on the 401 and the 201. So the antenna elements are the same. They have the same gain and everything. Just mean there's just doubled up on the 401. So will we be interested? So there's a question here from Scott. Will we be interested in introducing an adapter for the Puma antenna that will fit 1-inch by 14-inch antenna bases? Yes, we will. Let me get something up for you here that you will like to see. I believe this is on the forum as well, but I will just bring it up. We have made a very nice adapter. And the adapter we've actually designed is going to work with both the HD Dome range as well as with the Puma range at the same time. So I'm just trying to find the drawings we've got here. I'm not sure I've got it there. Let me just see, because it might be in the emails. So this is something I don't think we might have put up yet. Hang on, so I'm just searching for it now. Okay, so this one here. So I'm just going to bring this one up. So this here is what we have come up with. So the sleeve on the right here, the adapter 2, this one is for the Puma. So this one on the bottom of it here will connect to a 1-inch maritime standard fitting, and on the top you'll be able to screw the Puma straight into there. If you're using it with the dome, you would insert this adapter in the top here, and then the dome would screw onto the top of it there as well. So these two adapters combined work with both the Puma and the HD2 dome. So just see. Yeah, so there we go. There's a image there on the right of how they kind of combine together for both the dome adapter and the one that's for the Puma adapter there as well. That's how it worked with the Puma, just without this little pinky purple one there in the middle. So yeah, so I hope that kind of answers your question there. Before anyone asks, the availability of those, I don't know yet, but if you watch on the forum, there is a topic up about that, and I will probably add some more information about that soon. Okay, next question. Question from Benjamin. Do you have an antenna that can be used to provide internet for 4 to 6 cameras operation in a field with no direct internet access? For example, a sports tournament held outside. So I'm assuming, do you mean like having a base station or something that cameras can talk back to? If you want, send us an email. I will I'll put our socials up there now. So there's all our contact details and that. If you send us an email, and explain your situation, we can kind of come up with a solution for that. Abby, the question about the recording of this, yes, it has been recorded, and yes, it will be posted on the forum at a later date, so you will be able to watch that there. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? I've seen a few comments come through there on the chat there as well. There's a lot of people asking about the SpeedFusion Cloud. Travis did a webinar on that a few months ago. So if you want to have a look at that webinar, if you search our forum for, I'm sure it will be there, otherwise it's on YouTube. JJ asked, when being away from shore, how far is the distance on 5G compared to 4G? So 5G, you're not going to get very far away with the current 5G due to the limitations on it. It's a very short range, high throughput connection at the moment. But the router, so our 5G devices do also cover LTE. So if 5G is not available, they will use LTE as well. So you will still get the long ranges of the LTE. So I hope that answers that question there. But ultimately, and compared to 4G, the ranges will be quite small on 5G. Okay, so last chance for some questions here, because I think that is all that we've covered for today. I don't see any more questions coming in. So I am just going to give you guys a warning that tomorrow is April Fool's. So do be on your awares tomorrow morning. So yeah, have a great weekend or great day, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you in the next webinar. Cheers. Bye.